publicly admitting your party doesn't care enough about Black America, then it's time for a new black friend. Enter Dr. Ben Carson, who's been embraced recently because he's smart and helpful in assuaging their guilt. Carson is a bootstraps kind of guy, speaking their language, talking like he built his path from a poor kid to a pediatric neurosurgeon all by himself. He must have gotten government-backed school loans, which is a form of public assistance, but let's not let facts derail a good I built it without help story.
Latest example, NBC News going after Dr. Benjamin Carson. He's now being subjected to the left's intolerance. Unfortunately, he joins a long list of African Americans who have been criticized for the same thing, being conservative. Joining me now to respond, John Hopkins, University Director of Pediatric Neurosurgery, Dr. Benjamin Carson. You know, Dr. Carson, I'm sick of this. I am tired of African American conservatives. They can be called any name in the book. I want to get your reaction to it.
Well, first of all, you know, the individual who was just speaking completely has his facts incorrect. Some people refuse to say the word, but I will say it. He's lying, and it's very easy to prove that by going back and looking at things that I've said. I think when people don't have, you know, anything worthwhile to talk about, and they can't attack you on your character, then they start calling you names. This is a trick that we learned back in the 3rd grade.
This phenomenon, how do you explain it? And it is, do you think it's to silence African-American conservatives because there's a threat to...
Yes. It's an attempt to bludgeon people into silence, and it works extremely well. I can't tell you how many people come up to me, both African Americans and non-African Americans, and say, thank you so much for speaking out. They obviously feel the same way, but they're afraid to speak out because they don't want to be ostracized. You know, fortunately, in my case, I really don't care what they have to say. You know, I care what God has to say, and I care about the principles that He has espoused.
You know what? I'm in the same debate. If I cared what people said, I couldn't be sitting here right now. I'd be in a loony bin, and you'd be visiting me and wondering about whether I need electric shock treatment or something.
Well, not only that, but the number of people who have positive things to say far outweigh the negative ones.
Yeah, I just think, I wonder... It seems to me every election cycle, Dr. Carson, this issue of race comes up in a negative way. I mean, you can go back to 1998, Democratic Party, radio ad, Missouri. If you elect Republicans, black churches will burn. The James Byrd ad in 2000. They're going to put you all back in chains. Al Gore going into his black preacher voice, like Hillary Clinton did, before a predominantly African-American audience.
Well, because everything for them is about race. You know, I like to say that the reason that I don't talk about race that often is because I'm a neurosurgeon, and I look at the thing that actually makes a person who they are. It's not the cover, but for them, the cover is everything because they're very superficial thinkers.
Isn't as a Christian, because I'm a Christian, the concept that we're brothers and sisters in Christ, isn't that the real thing? Isn't that really...
Absolutely. And that's considerably more important than any external characteristic, which I believe a loving God gave us external differences because He didn't want us to be bored. How horrible would it be if everybody looked the same?
All right, last question. We have the issue of the Supreme Court dealing with 2 issues involving gay marriage. I've asked you a lot of questions. I've never asked you that. What are your thoughts?
Well, my thoughts are that marriage is between a man and a woman. It's a well-established fundamental pillar of society, and no group, be they gays, be they NAMBLA, be they people who believe in bestiality, it doesn't matter what they are, they don't get to change the definition. So it's not something that's against gays, it's against anybody who wants to come along and change the fundamental definitions of pillars of society. It has significant ramifications.
You know, it was interesting because Justice Sotomayor brought up the issue of polygamy and incest. Where does the definition stop? And I guess we'll be debating it for the weeks and months to come. But Dr. Carson, thank you for standing strong, and I'm sorry that you had to go through that treatment for just speaking your mind and being an individual. Thank you.
It won't be the end of it.
Okay, you're eating into my time. Okay. All right, thank you so much. It's really wonderful to be here. I thank the organizers for inviting me. And thank you, Eric, for what you said. You made it unnecessary for me to talk about political correctness. Enough said. But I want to talk a little bit about what's logical and what's common sense today, because we don't hear a lot of that And I don't think that common sense should be something that is just for conservatives. You know, liberals and everybody else should understand and enjoy common sense also. For some strange reason, sometimes they don't. But, you know, it's very interesting, you know, the outpouring of sentiment that I received after the speech at the National Prayer Breakfast. I got so much mail, letters, books, just amazing from everybody. And some of the more poignant ones were from older Americans who said they had given up and they were just waiting to die. And now they felt a sense of revival once again. You know? And that's very sad that we have reached a point in our lives where there's so many people who feel that they're not represented anymore. And this is something I want you people who are in Congress and who are in the Senate and who are in the White House to understand. You work for the people. You represent the people. You know, if you can understand that. I also got a few nasty grams from people. How dare you insult my president? You are a N-word, and you need to get back. You know, it's just unbelievable, you know. But, you know, when did we reach a point where you have to have a certain philosophy because of the color of your skin? When did that happen? You know? You know, a reporter once asked me why I didn't talk a lot about race. And I said, because I'm a neurosurgeon. And they thought that was pretty strange. And I said, you see, when I take someone to the operating room and I cut the scalp and peel it down and take off the bone flap and open the dura, I'm operating on the thing that makes that person who they are. The cover doesn't make them who they are. When are we going to understand that? But you know, the thing that really is important to me, and it's largely because of my own background, you know, growing up in a single-parent home in the inner city with dire poverty, terrible temper, poor self-esteem. My nickname in school was Dummy. And you know, it was because I had a mother who believed in me. And she was always saying, Benjamin, you're much too smart to be bringing home grades like this. I brought them home anyway, but she was always saying that, you know. She was very encouraging. And, but more importantly, you know, she made sure that at some point we turned off the TV and started reading books. And, you know, she worked a lot. You know, my mother worked 3 jobs at a time. She would leave at 5 in the morning, get home at midnight. And, you know, people always said to me, well, why did you guys read the books? Your mother wasn't there. Well, she would know if you didn't read the books. And the fact of the matter is, back in those days, you had to do what your parents said. You know, you couldn't call 911 or some social worker or some psychologist who said, let the kid express themselves, you know. And there was a reason for that. But you know, the education worked for me. You know, I started reading within a year and a half. I went from the bottom of the class to the top of the class. The same kids who were calling me dummy in the 5th grade were coming to me in the 7th grade. Benny, how do you work this problem? And I'd say, sit at my feet, youngster, while I instruct you. But maybe a little obnoxious, but it sure felt good. But, you know, the thing is, by that time, I had a very, very different impression of myself. And education is such a fundamental principle of the success of America. And we're allowing it to go under. You know, you go out there and you talk to the average person now, they may be able to tell you who won Dancing with the Stars. They may be able to tell you who won the football game. But they can't tell you anything that's important. They don't know about foreign policy. They don't even know about the way that our government works and the structure of it and what things mean. And consequently, they have become the ignorant. They have become the unprepared. This is exactly what the founders of this country warned against. They said, our system of government is based upon a well-educated and informed populace. And if our populace ever becomes anything other than that, we will become a different country. They knew what they were talking about. And as witness to that fact, Congress has a 9% approval rating, and yet we return to people at a rate of 90% to Congress. Now, what does that tell you? It tells you that people go in the voting booth and they say, there's a name I recognize. I'm going to vote for that one. You know, they have no idea whether that person represents them or not. And what I'm saying to people, the people of America today, is that we are responsible. This is a country that's for, of, and by the people, not for, of, and by the government. And if we turn it over to them, we cannot complain about what they're doing, because this is the natural course of men, and we have to hold their feet to the fire. And that's why we have these complex brains. And I don't say this just because I'm a neurosurgeon. The brain is the most complex and phenomenal organ system in the universe. Your brain, billions and billions of neurons, hundreds of billions, even trillions of interconnections. The number of interconnections you have rivals the national debt. I mean, it's an amazing amount. And it has the ability to remember everything you've ever seen, everything you've ever heard. Your brain can process more than 2 million bits of information in 1 second. And the reason that human beings have these gigantic frontal lobes is because we're the creatures that have the ability to extract information from the past, integrate that with information of the present, and project that into the future. Which means we can be proactive, we can plan, we can strategize. We don't have to just react. And yet, that's what animals do, react. And a lot of people today have decided that they rather react like animals rather than planning and strategizing. And this is what we've done now. We're reacting to, what we see as our fiscal woes without planning for the future, without really caring about what is happening to the next generation. And you don't have to be a brain surgeon or a rocket scientist to understand that if we continue to spin ourselves into oblivion, we are going to destroy our nation. If I were trying to destroy this nation, if you just, let's say you magically put me, into the White House, and now, all right, I take it back. but let's say somebody were there, and they wanted to destroy this nation. What would you do? Let me tell you what I would do. First of all, I would create division among the people. I would have everybody pitted against each other, because a wise man by the name of Jesus once said, a house divided against itself cannot stand. And then I would encourage a culture of ridicule for basic morality and the principles that made and sustained the country. And then I would undermine the financial stability of the country and drive it so far into debt that there was absolutely no chance that it could recover. And I would weaken the military and destroy the morale of the military. That's what I would do, and I guarantee you it would work. Now, the question is, it appears coincidentally that those are the very things that are happening right now. And the question is, how do we stop it? Can we stop it? Or must we inexorably follow the same kind of path that other pinnacle nations have followed before their destruction? Because all of those things that I just mentioned are the things that happened to other pinnacle nations before their fall. And, you know, this is not something that has just started in the last 4 or 5 years. This has been going on for quite some time now. So let's not lay all the blame on any one particular person. But the fact of the matter is we all have a responsibility to recognize what is and to use our influence to correct some of these things. You know, one of the things that my wife and I have done is, you know, I go into the schools and we see all these trophies, all-state basketball, all-state wrestling, all-state this, that, and the other. The quarterback was the big man on campus. What about the academic superstar? What did they get? You know, a National Honor Society pin, pat on the head, they're a little nerd, you know. Nobody really cared about them. And, you know, I was aware of a survey that was done in 22 countries looking at the ability of 8th grade equivalents to solve math and science problems. We were one of the 22 countries, and we came in number 21 out of 22, barely beat out number 22. And I was devastated, and I said, we've got to do something about this. And we can't wait for the government to do something about this. We, as the private sector, have got to do something. So we started giving out scholarships out of our own pocket to children from all backgrounds who achieved at the highest possible levels academically and also demonstrated humanitarian qualities, that they cared about other people. And we gave out our first 25 scholarships 17 years ago, and just in the state of Maryland. And now, today, we have over 5,000 scholars in all 50 states. And these are incredibly bright young people. And in fact, just yesterday, I found out that one of our scholars was accepted into the neurosurgery residency at Johns Hopkins. So, fantastic. But the other component of the program is we put in reading rooms. And in that case, we particularly target Title I schools, where a lot of the kids come from homes with no books, and they go to schools with no libraries. Those are the ones who drop out of school. We have a 30% high school dropout rate. We really can't afford that. So we create these rooms that no kid could possibly pass it up. And they get points for the number of books they read, and they can trade them in for prizes. And in the beginning, they do it for the prizes, but after a while, it begins to translate into much better academic performance, and that's really the goal. Because you see, we can't afford to throw any of those young people away, because for every one of those young people we keep from going down that path of self-destruction, that's one less person that you have to protect yourself and your family from, one less person you have to pay for in the penal or the welfare system, one more tax-paying, productive member of society who may discover a new energy source. We need all of them. And the humanitarian part of the program, of the Carson Scholars Fund, is every bit as important as the academic part. Because you see, we are a humanitarian nation. And historically, we have been. Many people don't know this, but socialism started as a reaction to America. Because people in Europe, they looked at us and they said, wait a minute, look at those Americans. You got people like Ford and Kellogg and Vanderbilt, Rockefeller, Carnegie Mellon. They got so much money. And look at everybody else who's got nothing. And you can't run a system like that. You have to have an overarching government that receives the funds and redistributes it in a fair and equitable way. Have you ever heard that before? Well, what they didn't realize is that all those names that I just said, instead of like the land barons of Europe hoarding money and passing it down from generation to generation, instead they built the infrastructure of this nation. They put in the transcontinental railroad. They built factories and textile mills. They built the mechanism that created the most powerful and dynamic middle class the world has ever seen, which rapidly took us to the pinnacle. They built universities and museums and charitable organizations, because that has been the nature of Americans. We have always been generous. Nobody is starving on the streets. We've always taken care of them. We have churches, which actually are a much better mechanism for taking care of the poor because they are right there with them. This is one of the reasons that we give tax deductions to churches, because they do that. So why is the government trying to duplicate that we give tax deductions to churches? Because they do that. So why is the government trying to duplicate what they're supposed to be doing? You know, we need to start thinking smartly about the way that we use our resources, use our money. And, you know, in 2009, 40 of the wealthiest families in America pledged to give away half of their wealth to charity. Go someplace else in the world and ask the 40th wealthiest families to give away half their wealth. They'll look at you like you got 6 heads. This is an American phenomenon. We take care of our own. We always have. It is not the government's responsibility. It is our responsibility as citizens. And then, as long as we're talking about fairness, let's talk about taxes. You know, some people criticize me at the prayer breakfast for bringing up God and the Bible. I mean, it is a prayer breakfast, right? I don't understand that. But at any rate, you know, if God thinks proportionality is fair, who are we to say that it is unfair? The minute you begin to deviate away from proportionality, you begin to inject your own philosophy. And that is always going to lead you in one direction or another. I think that's why God had a program like that. You make $10 billion, you put in $1 billion. You make $10, you put in $1. You know, the guy who paid $1 billion just put in $1 billion times more than the other guy, but they get the same rights. What could be fairer than that? That's ridiculous. Now, I'll tell you what is not fair. What is not fair is when you exempt some people and you say, there, you poor little thing. You don't have to pay anything. We'll take care of you. You know what? To me, that's very offensive, having grown up poor, because what you're saying is that I, the superior elite one, will take care of you. Why? Because you see, that superior elite group needs to be superior and elite. And they can't be superior and elite unless you have a whole bunch of people down there groveling around. So you keep them down there by feeding them. You know? But the other ulterior motive is, if everybody doesn't have skin in the game, then you can just persecute this 1% or this 2% or this 5%. If everybody has skin in the game, you have to be responsible. Because if you come talking about raising taxes, you're raising taxes on everybody, you better have a darn good reason. Doesn't matter about 1 or 2%, but it really matters about everybody. That's what's fair. And then, just briefly, I don't have time to really go into it, but let me tell you something. Healthcare, 1/6 of our economy, if the government can control that, they can control just about everything. We need to understand what is going on, because there are much more economic models that can be used to give us good health care than what we have now. And we were asleep at the wheel to let it happen, but we have to find a way still to make it work. And if we have to work within the framework of the Affordable Health Care Act, fine. If we can find a way to defund it, fine. But we have to find more efficient ways. Think about this. 80% of the encounters between a patient and a healthcare provider could easily be handled by a health savings account. 80% of the encounter, without the need to insinuate a third party or bureaucracy, which sucks out at least a third of the money. And, you know, there are ways that we can do this. We can use bridge insurance and catastrophic insurance. You know, some of the, I don't want to call them morons, but there's something similar to that, you know, who say, well, Carson just talks about HSAs. How are you going to pay for it? How are you going to have catastrophic health care? Read the book. Read the book, America the Beautiful, and some other things that I've written. It'll show you how to do that. But obviously, I'm thinking about those things. I mean, it just, I don't know, it's almost laughable, some of the things that I hear people say who criticize you. They say, he's a neurosurgeon, so he couldn't know anything about economics. It's not brain surgery. And I can tell you this much, even as a lowly brain surgeon. If you have the highest corporate tax rates in the world, then of course corporations are going to have money elsewhere. Corporations are not in business to be social welfare organizations. They are there to make money. And a wise government knows how to use that to their advantage. There is a ton of money outside this country and inside this country just waiting to be unleashed to make all kinds of jobs and opportunities if we just treat them as our friends and not as our enemies. And finally, we have to resist this war on God. You know, I mean, people don't want to talk about God, and don't you ever dare mention Jesus Christ. And this is supposed to be a country where we have freedom of religion and freedom of speech. You know, it is absolutely absurd. Let's let everybody believe what they want to believe. And that means, PC police, don't you be coming down on the people who believe in God and who believe in Jesus. If they want to put something out that shows their belief, they have every right to do that. And we need to know, we need to understand that we are not each other's enemies in this country. And it is only the political class that derives its power by creating friction. It is only the media that derives its importance by creating friction, that uses every little thing to create this chasm between people. This is not who we are. We have much more in common with each other than we have apart. And we have to be smart enough to understand that. And we have to live by godly principles of loving your fellow man, of caring about your neighbor, of developing your God-given talents to the utmost so that you become valuable to the people around you, of having values and principles that guide your life. And if we do that, not only will we remain a pinnacle nation, but we will truly have one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you very much.